David Parker's in the house with us. Good morning, sir. It's good to have you in the studio.
Good morning, and I'll say when I came in this morning, I think I scared Perez for the first time, so I think that's the second time he's seen his life flash before his eyes in the last 20 minutes.
Look, he had to pay for the colonoscopy a couple of weeks ago, so the heart tests right now are good, so you're not going to charge him for that, so he's okay. Let's talk about this, man. We had an interesting conversation yesterday, Senator Parker, with John Horhn.
Right.
And the feedback on that one was absolutely incredible, but I don't know if we can get together on this thing at all. I think there's room for both sides to do that, Republicans and Democrats, white and black. But I want your thoughts about this. And first of all, specifically about you authored the bill 2889,
right,
which is the Capital Region Utility Act, what it says.
Yeah, and
what it does.
Let me start with this because I believe yesterday's segment started with, something to the effect of why would somebody from DeSoto County have interest in this? Mm-hmm. My history here in Jackson, and being here for 11 years now, as far as a senator, I have lived almost all of those years within the Jackson district. Most of it I've stayed full-time. I've got a daughter who is an attorney here in Jackson. She lives here, and what I do is during the Senate session, we share, or she allows me to have one of the bedrooms in her apartment. And so I keep a permanent residence here year-round. And one advantage that's given me is that all of the crisis that we've experienced here has hit me personally. I may not be here 12 months out of the year, but with my daughter here, every time there's been a disruption to water, every time there's been a problem, we've had to make arrangements to help her through that, whether it be teaching her how to run down to the swimming pool and move water up to the toilet to allow it to flush, or having her come home for a weekend, because there's been some disruption that is beyond what she can take care of. So it has hit me personally. And so I went into this as not the person who was asked to take this on, but as the person who physically asked to be the voice for this, because this affects the ratepayers. And whether a ratepayer has lived in Jackson for 1 year or for 55 years, they are affected equally by this. So I came into this, well before the federal money was received, with just a desire to do something better than what has been done that led us into this crisis. And so Senate Bill 2889 is an attempt that's a fluid attempt. We're continuing to make changes to it to try to improve the situation as it stands right now.
Again, what does the bill do? Just the thumb sketch of what the bill does.
So it would move the oversight of the water within the territory that was affected by the violations of the Clean Water Act to a regional utility authority. It would do that only after the receiver's work is completed. But the receiver, in documents he's put out and discussions, I think needs some help and input from the ratepayers and the people in the water district, to get through this journey as the money to repair the problem as best possible is distributed. And so this would allow a board to be set up. That board would be comprised of 9 members. All of those 9 members would have to be a ratepayer within the existing water district. We've made some changes to the board. I've had opportunity already to meet or talk with Mayor Byram, with Richard White, with Ed McGee from Ridgeland. I sat down with Mayor Lumumba, and we discussed some things, and I've tried to take those discussions and make adjustments to the bill to get the appointments right in particular. So of those appointments, originally we had 4 appointments by the Mayor of Jackson, and 2 of those would require him to consult with the Mayor Byram or the Mayor of Ridgeland. After discussions, we moved that around. So now the Mayor of Jackson will have 4 appointments to the board that are his appointments. Then the Lieutenant Governor will have 2 appointments, of which one, in this model, he would have to consult with the Mayor of Ridgeland on. The Governor will have 3 appointments, of which one of those the Governor would consult with the Mayor of Byram on that. Once this body is put in place, each of the appointees would have to be confirmed with advice and consent from the Senate. I've already expressed interest in being involved in that process to make sure we get the right people on here who can do a good job, and then they would go about the business of trying to hire the best person to run the system.
Wait a minute. When you say they, who is they?
The board.
The board itself.
The
Okay.
9-member
All right.
board would. That best person we would hope to have in place by the beginning of next year. In discussions and in the documents from the receiver, he was hoping to have some governance of some sort in place by September 30th of this year. And I think the model that we're putting forward here allows that to happen. We can have the board in place and be moving towards a president or executive director in the timeline requested.
Is this getting the pushback is the pushback from the Black Caucus, Senator Parker, one entity with everything combined, or is this more palatable than, say, the establishment of new courts or judges? Or is it just everything combined in one big pile?
I think what's happened on this is that we have several pieces of legislation that are moving, and they're in some ways getting rolled into the same discussion.
Yeah.
I see those as separate issues. What we're acting on here is something that has been required, by federal intervention, by violations of the Clean Water Act. We have a receiver in place who is going to do his best, and I trust that he will do a great job in getting the money to the needed areas, and then after that, according to the plan set out by the receiver, a future governance model is a requirement, I believe, for the receiver to leave. And if you go through the documents from the receiver, he laid out some potentials for that. He mentioned privatization. He mentioned a local utility authority. He mentioned just kind of leaving it as is. The Capital Regional Authority, like I'm proposing. And then he mentioned a nonprofit. And what I've tried to do after that comment by him is kind of merge the regional nonprofit with, the Capital Regional Utility Authority with the nonprofit model, and kind of fall in line a little more with what we did with the lottery board, because I don't feel that just a nonprofit as it is has worked out very effectively in our state. There have been instances where oversight and governance has been needed over some of the nonprofits, and we've paid the price sometimes when we did not provide that.
But in its simplicity of being autonomous, after you guys make the recommendations or put your graces on the appointees through the Senate process, they will have that autonomy as far as the board's concerned, with more input from the mayor of Jackson than just about anybody else. Is that right?
That's my intent. And, if you look carefully at the bill, when putting the language together, typically, and I mentioned this on the floor of the Senate, typically in a bill like this, because the governor is the chief executive officer of the state, you would typically list in the appointees the governor's appointees, and then the lieutenant governors, and then the mayor, because that's the kind of the flow of government. But I felt strongly that the mayor and his role was important enough to list first. And I will share too that my conversations with the mayor have been cordial. They've been they've been productive in the sense that I've learned from that.
When did you have those conversations as far as the redone up to 4 appointees? When was that held?
So we just met and we talked about the amount of effort that the mayor has put in to improve this problem. And no matter where your politics lie, I think we all have the vision to try to improve the water system.
Yeah, did he have a press conference? We'll continue this on the other side. Did he have a press conference to say anything? I guess what I'm searching for is, did he say anything that was an olive branch that said, look, I'm looking at this one, this looks a lot better at all, or did he dismiss this new plan as well as the old plan as far as the 4 appointees compared to 3?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's been any agreement in any such.
All
But
right.
I think there has been a desire to work together
All right.
for the ratepayers by both of us.
I'm going to ask you when we come back, how's this new interim director that they've appointed to lead the agency to run the local infrastructure, the city engineer Robert Lee, how does that play into this? When we come back with Senator David Parker next. Back to our guest, it's Senator David Parker, who's District 2 DeSoto County, and in real life is an optometrist, which, by the way, what's your comment as far as the medical marijuana? You think a lot of the optometrists, they can write this now, can't they?
You know, yes, you have to go through the process that we set up. You know, it's certainly not a first-line treatment for glaucoma. Optometrists were included in there because it is glaucoma is treated best by eye care professionals. You know, and we felt strongly that if that was going to be used for that purpose, it should be given that authority to the people who treat that disease.
Do you know many of your colleagues who are going to be doing that, or is it something that's probably going to? My understanding is it's happening a lot slower than some of the
I
some
think
of the
that's
people
a fair-
thought in our state. There are a lot of doctors who are resident about just resisting, maybe even getting involved with this across the state. And I'm beginning to wonder if some of the people who poured a lot of money in this are having second thoughts.
Well, I know in my work with Senator Blackwell, you know, he did a lot of work making sure this was a true medical marijuana program.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as it went along, there was some thought that, well, it's going to be medical, but it may still be something that gets used in a recreational kind of form. I think we were, you know, fortunate to put something in place that's going to be used for medical conditions, you know, and you know, and the reality is that we have other treatments for medical conditions that a lot of times are much more effective than what marijuana would be.
Let me ask you this, and I asked you this on the way out. And again, Senator David Parker is my guest. City Engineer Robert Lee was named Interim Director of the Jackson Public Works Department on Friday of last week as Jackson begins a nationwide search to find a permanent candidate to fill that position. Is that something that is at odds with what you guys are doing, or is that in line?
I said what we're doing here is about the future governance. You know, it's getting the board in place so that they can come alongside the receiver, come alongside Jackson as these federal funds are used. And let me be clear on this, all of those federal dollars are to be used within the area that suffered as the violation of the Clean Water Act. You know, so having that in place where they can come along will allow the receiver, you know, the parties that are involved during this interim period to select the best people to run this. After the receiver leaves, the receiver and myself, and I think the people of Jackson, want to make sure that the path is set so that the improvements that are made can be enhanced and move forward after that interim period is complete.
Well, one of the things we talked about yesterday was talking about fairness, but and there was some good feedback on this also. When you start talking about fairness, though, and Becky was with me, Curry, and I think there were other people who said this also, the amount of literally millions of gallons of raw sewage being poured into the Pearl River, that the people south of here forget about gender or age or ethnicity or political ideology. That crap's going downstream, and everybody's going to suffer from that. So the city of Jackson, not only in our reputation economically across the entire nation, but there are consequences to that ineptitude.
Right, and I'll share on that as chair of economic development. We've worked really hard the last 4 years to put in, you know, kind of a framework. We set up the Office of Workforce Development. We've been moving forward with you know, economic development projects that I think are historic in their nature, you know. But there have been entities that have looked at our state. And with the national press we got on the water crisis, there have been people who have asked people that I know, you know, what's up with the water in Mississippi? The question has not been what's up with the water in Jackson. The question you know, at a national level has moved to our entire state suffers from this, you know, and so we need to get this right. We need to get it right during this great period of opportunity where we have some federal funds to help solve the problem. But we need to get it right beyond that. And I'll share that in the apartment complex we live in, they're now asking for referral fees to get more people to move in. In the time that we have lived in that complex, that has not been the case. So that tells me, as a ratepayer and as a tenant there, year round, that there are people who are leaving that area, and I was so encouraged with the improvements that we saw in the Fondren area in particular. In the past 5 years, some of the enhancements there were just, in my opinion, fantastic. But I've seen, again, this is my opinion, in the last couple of years, a little step back as we've gone through this water crisis. So my intent in this is to leave this where we can get back on the right track and do better, because I think we can do better.
Well, and one of the qualities of life too, David, and you know this, especially with the younger generation, is places to eat, things to do. And when you have these people trying to hold on, as certainly the restaurants out there, it is a nightmare from them, from the pandemic into everything else that's happened to them. Do you think you could have done this in a better way of bringing some of their side to the table and discussing this? Was that ever done? And I mean specifically not only this, but also for the court system, elective versus appointive. I understand this, but when you hear yesterday the interview from John Horn, I don't know how we solve that, because everybody keeps wanting to go back to the days of slavery, which I don't know a lot of people that I've ever interviewed that were involved in that directly. And I'm not being sarcastic about this, but at some point you would have to get together and start talking about that, and both sides listen to this. Was there ever that kumbaya moment to get together and say, all right, here's what we want to do, and this is why we're doing it?
I think most of the people have had some input or feedback that they have provided in this process. Mm-hmm. The way the legislature works is it's on fast forward the second we hit the building. I've been working on this. I started working on this last summer, putting some things together from meetings and other things. I was not always the person attending the meeting, but I was getting, feedback on what was going on. And as the legislature works, sometimes the best way to make something happen is to put a product out there, and then to look for feedback and look for input, to make that happen. And
so the committee process would just not going to happen. Let me give you an example of this, because I asked John this, and John looks at it more of racism than party politics, Democrat against Republican. But when you go back and look at the days through the toughest fight in my lifetime for the Speaker of the House's position, in that real close call for Billy McCoy comes in and cuts the leg out of every chairman, and I think maybe for the vice chairman, I'm not sure, but there were just no Republicans in charge from some retaliatory methods after this. That wasn't a racism thing. That was a political thing.
Right. And, on this, since you mentioned politics, I've had some people say, well, we need to look at this after session. We need to think about it. We need to talk about it. We need to do more like that. But the reality of how politics works in our state is that there's already that desire by a number of legislators to get back home and start running for re-election. And just in my 3 terms of being here, I feel like when we leave here, early April or into March, there's not going to be a lot of input by many of the leaders, because they are going to be working on their campaigns and that kind of thing. So we're given an opportunity here to put something in place where, we can make a good effort to get this right. And then next year, if we made if we need to make some adjustments, we can certainly make adjustments to it. But it's easier to have the team come alongside the receiver, have some other people from the community involved in this, instead of people who are just looking at it from kind of outside. We need some of the ratepayers actually involved in the board to make this a better product.
This was, and I just find this interesting. This was from the JJ website, and factual. I think every elected official in the House and Senate ought to be curious about this. And the report was Jackson obtained about $27.9 million in something called the SWDRF loan. They got this from the Mississippi State Department of Health back in 2021. It was $27.9 million. And according to this website, it was the State Revolving Fund, SRF, loan program, which offered affordable financing options to cities and towns, and et cetera. But he says, guess how much the city spent when asked the total amount the health department has processed Since 2021, of that 27.9 million, the report was $826,580. To put that in perspective, if and I'm sure the EPA has this data and better for clarification, but of that 27.9 million, 27 million is still available and hasn't been used or used somewhere else. So they only used the 0.9 or $826,000 with the system in a perpetual state of collapse. Why in the world wasn't that used?
I think you're making the point very succinctly for the need for a difference in the future governance.
Yeah.
Because we need oversight, we need the ratepayers knowing what's going on, and we just need a different system going forward if we're going to get this right.
I did hear people say prior to this that if we can, and prior to even the governor getting involved, and I'll give you the last to say when we come back, that we need some help, please step in. And then after you guys stepped in, that's when the reality was it's just not going to work as far as Kumbaya is concerned. Final thoughts from David Parker coming up next.
You need to get going. The Gallo Radio Show, Super Talk, Mississippi.
We're back, final segment with Senator from District 2, David Parker, and there was the PERS thing. I was just going to ask you about this. You may or may not know this. So the House leaders quietly let a bill die that has stripped some of the authority of the board that oversees the Mississippi Public Employees Retirement System. Do you know if that's dead, or any update on that, Bill?
I have no knowledge
else.
of that, but
Yeah.
I don't see any action on
Path
PERS.
forward for that. All
I
right.
don't see any possibility.
Senator John Polk, your colleague, will come in. I'll ask him about that one, and of course the initiative process, where that stands in the Senate. Your final thoughts on this as we move forward?
Well, one thing I want to share that I don't know if everyone's aware of, but part of the receiver's plan that I find just very interesting, I think a great move forward, is that part of the federal money is available to be used to retire some of the debt. The Jackson water system has a tremendous amount of debt. I think it's a little over $250 million, and if the $450 million trunk of this award, if a portion of that was used to retire the debt, the impact would be that the system, no matter who's running it, would have $23 million of available annual income that would not be going out in debt service payment after that. So I think we can get this back where it flows on, as the receivers call it, a pay-as-you-go type of system. I think we have an opportunity to shore this back up where, it's fiscally sound and it actually ready to excel and move forward. And if that does happen, I think we have the opportunity to draw people back into the Jackson area, and expand and improve things that have been hurt by the water crisis.
Let me ask you this, because I haven't heard this brought up a lot, and I'm not sure where in this whole wax ball of incompetence this lies, but is anything addressing the meters themselves from the Siemens Group and that contract that was cut? Because you've got to have that to put it back on track, as you were just mentioning. If you're going to get this thing back on track and have viable bills other than the valuation of your home, right, those meters have got to work.
And again, this bill does not have anything to do with the rate structure, but I have had discussions with the receiver, and the meters that were put in actually can function. They just haven't been given that opportunity yet. That was a surprise to me. I thought most of them were dead, but there is some opportunity there. But, the problem, and I didn't hear Becky Curry's segment yesterday, is that there are at least over 6,500 entities out there that are receiving water that are not receiving a bill. So first you have to identify where the water's going, where this $30 million gallons a day of water is ending up. And if those locations do not have a meter, there might have to be a period of time where you have to bill somebody something until you can get them a meter in place. But that will be a decision for the receiver. That'll be a decision for the board and the new president. And I think the ratepayers will make the right decision on that. It doesn't need to be a one-person decision. that needs to be a decision made from all of the information available to make this best going forward.
What happens if Mr. Henifin decides, I'm not going to step down in 2 years?
Well, this board and the authority of the board and the authority of the leader that's appointed, they have no purview, they have no ability to run anything while the receiver is in place. If Ted Henifin decides to stay for 6 years, this board will just come alongside and just be, a tool that, can spread information to the community during that time, but there will be no oversight or any authority that's given until, Ted Henifin and his team feel like they have left this in good order. And I also feel that it's important, for Ted, to leave here with this better. It's important for you and I to leave, this opportunity with it better. And just in the brief meeting I've had with him, I feel like his heart's in the right place. I think he's looking to make a difference, and I look forward to working with him, to move this forward.
Last shot here from David Parker. Any bills that you want to spotlight that you have that are still alive?
One thing I just want to give some attention to, I think the career coaches that Ryan Miller and his team have put in place across the state have been one of the hidden gems across the state. We were able to establish that last year. I look forward to moving workforce development type of legislation this year, to try to continue that and maybe expand it if we can going forward. And just giving Office of Workforce Development and Accelerate the tools and the resources they need, to continue to look to get more people back into the workforce is my goal as we go forward.
It has been some remarkable changes in that in just a short period of time when we look for more. Good work, David. I thank you so very much on that one also, because it's most important to attract businesses into this state, as you well know. David Parker, Mississippi Senator, District 2, DeSoto County, which continues to explode up there, by the way. How many more people from Memphis can we get into that area?
Well, they're moving. It's interesting. I think we've tapped out on the Memphis market. We're pulling people in from California and other places where they kind of see our life here in Mississippi as being,
God forbid, don't become Austin, Texas, though. Let's watch. Let's give them a litmus test before we sell them real estate.
I agree.
I'm only joking. David, thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. John Pope coming up at 8:05.